1979年、イギリス初の女性首相となったマーガレット・サッチャー氏。日本初の女性首相に就任した高市早苗氏は、サッチャー氏を憧れの政治家と語ります。11年にわたり政権を担った鉄の女はどのようなリーダーだったのか。秘書官として近くで支えた人物がその素顔と虚像を語ります。
They had to be tougher than the men. They had to show that they had an iron spirit. Some people say that she liked to be the queen bee.
It sounds a little bit misogynistic.
Everything you're doing is being watched. One sign of weakness and you're out.
Maybe no one was forcing me, but I forced myself to prove that I can
Absolutely.
do something.
It has changed people. It's changed people's perception of women in power. Just going to use my right.
You can just face
Right.
me and just talk to me or relax. I haven't started yet, but I'm very honored to have you here. I really wanted to hear your insights because you might meet some audience, you might have learned, but Japanese society is still very male-dominated society, even in the media and of course in the political system.
Yes, very something like 15% of what we would call MPs are women. You know,
Yes,
a tiny
very low.
proportion really in today's world.
Yes.
And also, you know, when I was in Japan, I was sort of struck, you know, going on the metro, how few women there were because, you know, they were at home looking after their children.
Oh gosh.
You know, and compared to this country, you know, it didn't seem to be the same gender balance.
Right.
And also, when I hear Japanese women speaking, you know, they speak, I think possibly you do as well, very softly.
Yeah.
You know, they're not going to be strident.
Right. We talk to like that.
Yes, you know, and
I think it happens unconsciously.
yes,
Talking softly, like in a higher voice.
yeah. Whereas, you know, well, you may not know actually, but Margaret Thatcher was taught to lower her voice and sound
Yes.
more like a man.
I saw the
Deeper.
movie.
Yes.
Yeah.
Oh, you've seen the movie, right? Yeah. So, you know, and to be, you know, to kind of, you know, stop wearing hats in those days, and basically, you know, shoulder pads, and just try and make herself more assertive. You know, the Iron Lady. So that was partly a kind of construct because when she first became leader of the opposition, she was, if you listen to her speaking, you know, she's speaking quite softly. And she says, "I can't believe it's me."
Really?
Yes, you know, it's, you know, I can't believe it's me. It's only me still. You know, so she had to kind of create her persona.
Right.
And in certain respects, you know, it wasn't entirely authentic.
Can I ask that same question to you
Yes.
in that interview? Okay.
Yes.
That's very interesting.
Yeah.
いいですか? Okay, so gonna start the interview, but thank you very much for your time today. From your experience working with Margaret Thatcher, I would like to ask about her leadership and how people saw her at that time. So, as you might know, Sanai Takaichi became a new leader, but she's already struggling because the coalition she hoped for is not happening. And Thatcher too, I guess, was a very controversial figure. But how did people in Britain react when she first became Prime Minister?
Well, I mean, she was a phenomenon, and you know, I think people were actually probably quite excited. But she was a controversial figure because she was right of the Conservative Party, and you know, she had battles even in her own party really for what she stood for. But yes, I think she was a novelty, and you know, I think there was a lot of energy behind her. Which helped her actually, because I think being different in politics can cut through. Everybody here says politicians are all the same, and Margaret Thatcher was, you know, evidently completely different. So she was this, you know, extraordinary, diminutive figure, you know, surrounded by men in the political world, and yet half the electorate were women. And I think she appealed to many of those, but feminists loathed her because she wasn't really kind of believing that. It's a bit of a paradox. She didn't really believe that women should get special treatment. She saw it. She saw feminism as a way of trying to give women special treatment, when in fact she said she didn't want that. She just wanted to be seen for on her merits. And feminists struggled with her because she was right wing and feminists were left wing. So she was controversial, but I think that she was off to a good start. But then she had a tricky few years after that.
I think the same thing's happening right now in Japan, because she might or might not become the first prime minister, but yet the Japanese women are not necessarily celebrating because of her controversial views. I mean, because of her conservative views. But you said that it also happened for Margaret Thatcher.
Definitely, and even after she'd been in power for 11 and a half years and was a sort of towering figure on the international stage, there were many people who really still couldn't accept her. They either kind of portrayed her as a sort of harridan, a kind of hag, a woman dressed in man's clothing. There was a spitting image cartoon of her with this sort of grey face and man's suit, sort of handbagging her colleagues. So they felt that she was not acceptable. They didn't. A lot of people didn't like her. And then feminists were saying when she died, one of the members of Parliament said that she was a woman, but not on my terms. And Hilary Mantel, who's a best-selling author, said that she was a psychological transvestite. So even sort of years after she'd been in power, women were not fully accepting her, which actually is very hard, because she did do an incredible thing, which is to break through an enormous glass ceiling at the time, probably equivalent or similar to the glass ceiling that exists in Japan at the moment.
Okay. And going back to the first question, I asked you about the reaction of the people when Margaret Thatcher became Prime Minister. But before that, what kind of difficulties did Thatcher face to actually become a Prime Minister? You said she had to change herself.
Yes, I mean, well, she was facing a lot of sexism and misogyny in the country, but also in her own party. The previous Prime Minister said that he called her that bloody woman. So when she did become leader, she had her advisors advised her to change her voice and to deepen it, to give it more power, and to wear slightly different clothes so that she didn't look like a Tory wife, but looked like a Tory leader. And the Tory leader, so the shoulder pads, the kind of trying to, because she was quite a small woman. She wasn't tall, but it was about kind of trying to project herself. So this deeper voice, speaking more slowly, she affected it. A lot of people hated that. A lot of people, in fact myself, before I became a civil servant and worked for her, I couldn't bear to hear her voice because it was so inauthentic. But that's what she was told to do. So my advice to her would be, now keep the authenticity, because the authenticity is part of your power. Being different, being yourself, is a very it cuts through to the electorate. It can make you popular rather than just trying to be someone else.
Right. But at the time, maybe it was difficult if she didn't adjust to that male-dominated society.
One of her colleagues said that if a man shouts, if a man raises his voice, he shouts. But if a woman raises her voice, she screeches, she squeaks. And so, there was this sort of view that and I don't know if you've ever seen scenes in our parliament, but it's quite rough.
Right.
So in order to literally be heard, she had to make her voice stronger and more powerful.
Do you think it was effective at that time?
Well, she she became prime minister. I think that, so yes, I suppose it was, and she was in power for 11.5 years. And so maybe it won more people over, but it did turn quite a few people off.
No. Okay. Sanae Takaichi is always saying that her political role model was Margaret Thatcher. But in your view, what are the most essential qualities or conditions needed for someone to become a leader like Thatcher?
Gosh. Well, I think that she's going to need thick skin. She's going to get a lot of attacks, misogynistic attacks, and it's going to be tough. She'll be more in the public eye than any man would be. She'll be scrutinised for her clothes, her looks, all those sorts of things. I think, particularly now with social media, I think she's going to have thick skin, and try to kind of rise above that. I think one of the things that Margaret Thatcher did, which was really one of her strengths, was she didn't really read the newspapers. Every morning she'd just have a sort of 2-page digest. She had to kind of focus on the bigger prize. So I think, which was the longer term, and that's what made her, the person who changed Britain, which I think, your woman, your candidate would, like to do as well in terms of Japan. So I think, keeping an eye on the long distance, not the sort of short-term challenges, I think is one of the things. Working hard. Thatcher worked extraordinarily hard. She scarcely slept, and sort of worked, slept 5 hours a night. She would go right through her boxes every night. She would get these boxes of work, they're called ministerial boxes, and I would send them in. She would always do them, and you could see her writing, underlining the words and then nodding off and then coming back again because she had to carry on working. And I think women in power, especially if they're in a great minority, have to work harder than the men. But the danger there is that you lose the relationships. You put your nose into your papers, reading them, but you don't notice that your relationships are going wrong. And with Margaret Thatcher, the relationships with her colleagues became very bad, and eventually led to her being forced out of power, along with political difficulties. So I think that that is another quality that she needs to bear in mind, that she needs to be able to win friends, and particularly when you're building a coalition.
You mentioned that women has to work harder than men if she's in that kind of position, and she also said that women would be attacked more than men. Why do you think so?
Well, I don't know what it's like in your country, but certainly here and in many other countries, there's still a great deal of misogyny, and it's rife in social media. So women in politics tend to get more personal attacks and death threats and rape threats, even in this country, than men. And I think it's just, it's partly that there is a kind of latent misogyny in our culture, and incel and things like that are kind of inflaming these views, and it's a way of trying to undermine someone. And if you're going to be prime minister, then you have to be strong, and you have to believe in yourself. And I think that authenticity, that self-belief, is a really critical factor. And it's something that Margaret Thatcher definitely had, right to the very core. She didn't mind being unpopular. She just, and she believed in her own views. She even sort of shut out opposing views, which in a way is a strength, and it did carry her through, but it also brought her down. And often one's strengths are also one's weaknesses.
Why do you think that has brought her down?
Which, for many years made her, I think, very kind of strong. She surrounded herself by people who were very loyal and worked very hard on her behalf. And she kind of they helped to kind of build up her own kind of inner belief. But if you've got exceptional political judgment, and in many respects, for much of her career as a Prime Minister, she did have exceptional political judgment, then that's fine. But ultimately, you do have to rely on the electorate. And she started to take decisions that were not popular with the electorate. There was in particular something called the poll tax, which was a new form of tax, always a dangerous thing to do, introduce a new tax. And people hated it, they rioted. But she stuck to her guns. She said, I know I'm right, I'm going to push through. And she'd done that many times before. But actually she made too many enemies, and the MPs who ultimately voted her in as leader abandoned her. And so she had to go as Prime Minister. So, it's important to have these inner strengths, but you also have to be aware that actually relationships matter. Popularity does matter, even though it's quite a good thing not to be too worried if you are unpopular for a while as Prime Minister. But ultimately, it's a democracy, and so the democratic process really ultimately, the fear that they would lose the next election led to her being forced out of power.
I see. Must be a very, very difficult balance to hold it.
Well, I think it is, and but politicians are generally pretty good at doing it. I don't know about exactly what's happening in Japan, but when you're trying to build a coalition, which hasn't happened, it wasn't a situation for Margaret Thatcher and isn't normally the situation here. You really do have to build strong relationships, build trust, and move away from the extremes.
Okay. Well, some people say that Sanae Takaichi was inspired by Thatcher in her way of dressing. She chooses blue.
I've seen that.
Yes. And the length of the suit.
This block shape rather than emphasising the feminine shape. That's something that Thatcher did. Yes. And the bright blue standing out amongst the dark suits. I can see why she's doing it.
She was inspired in so many ways from Margaret Thatcher. Thatcher was known as the Iron Lady, but from someone who worked closely with her, what was the true essence of her leadership?
She was strong. She was a fighter. She could be angry with her colleagues and very forceful. But actually, as a person, she was quite sensitive and could be very kind. So there was a bit of a contradiction there. But a lot of women of her era, were called battle axes. I don't know if there's an equivalent phrase in Japanese, but they had to be tougher than the men. They couldn't be seen to be soft or crying in public. Right. They had to be, they had to show that they had an iron spirit, and that's how she portrayed herself. It was actually a phrase given to her by the Russians as an insult, but she took it to heart and played to it.
Okay. But have you ever seen her opposite side of her?
Absolutely. When we went out on visits, she would often connect really well with the general public, with a person. She would be very kind to people in the office. But when she was forced by her colleagues to resign, I was the only other woman in the room when she resigned, and she had a resignation statement which she was going to read out, and she was unable to read it because she was breaking down in tears. Her voice was breaking up. And when she got to the end of it, she said, I don't think you'll have heard that, so I'll read it again. And she did. She battled through it, but the emotion was there, and there were men in the room crying to see this. So, you know, that was a moment when the veil dropped, and you could see, you know, the sensitivity, the humanity, you know, as all politicians are, human beings, you know, that was there. But, you know, generally she couldn't show that sensitivity because she felt that she'd be attacked.
I think it must be very lonely, I guess, to become someone who you have to show to the public. You know?
I think so. I actually think that most politicians have to do it to a degree. And, you know, they put on a kind of particular face, a particular kind of suit. But I think it's particularly so for women, because it's much more difficult to feel comfortable in those positions of power when it's not the norm. I think it's changed in this country, but obviously, you know, in Japan it's a very different situation.
How do you think she coped with that kind of that sense of isolation?
Well, she surrounded herself by people that she liked, and she treated, you know, her kind of office, her staff, people like me, like family. You know, we would go up to the flat, we would eat with her, if we were writing speeches, you know, we would, you know, have drinks with her. You know, I think we were her family, and she was an incredibly hard-working woman, so she didn't really have a lot of friends. So I think she made friends of the people around her. But of course, after a while, and she was in power for a long time, that began to isolate her from her political colleagues, with whom she developed very bad relationships. Partly because I think she felt she was being undermined, but, you know, I think partly because she was a woman, she felt, you know, particularly angry when her colleagues didn't support her. So, you know, that technique of bringing close people around you worked, but actually ultimately it was part of the problem for her, because she hadn't got those good relationships with the colleagues who had, you know, on whom she depended really to retain her power.
And also from your own experience, I think you were the
first female private secretary, yes. And you know, it was rare for there to be women around her at that point, other than, you know, the secretaries and the typists and you know, people who helped her with her clothes. So yes, for me, I was breaking through a glass ceiling too, and that, you know, it was interesting because I don't think she really liked working with women. You know, she liked people who, you know, who were sort of close to her personally, but I don't think she really liked working with women because she was used to working with men, and you know, her relationships professionally were with men, and I think, you know, well, some people say that she liked to be the queen bee. It's a phrase, you know, there's only one queen.
It sounds a little bit misogynistic.
I know it does, but I think it's a bit unfair because there weren't that many female politicians to bring into her government, but she was, if you see photographs of her, it was just her and then all men. And you know, there's evidence definitely that she didn't get on with some of the women who were briefly in her government. So, you know, that's part of the situation. I don't know what the situation is in Japan now, but you know, whether she has got a lot of close female political colleagues to support her. But actually nowadays, you know, women know that having that network of female support is incredibly important, because when you have a problem you can confide, you can talk about it, whereas you can't talk about these sorts of things to the men, particularly if you think that you're a victim of sexism.
About Takaichi, this might be a bit of a detailed question, but Takaichi has made comments that some consider xenophobic. I guess Thatcher also took a cautious stance on immigration.
Yes.
And how did her policies affect the country at the time, and what long-term consequences did they have on British society?
In terms of immigration, or
Yes.
more generally? Well, immigration was not such a big issue at the time. I recall that she was negative about taking Vietnamese boat people.
Mm-hmm.
But it wasn't the big political issue that it is today.
Okay.
And you have to remember that she grew up in an era when Jews were fleeing Nazi Germany, and then we fought a war with Germany in order to fight for freedom, and including ensuring that people weren't discriminated against, and human rights laws were established as a consequence. So and she herself had a refugee, Jewish refugee girl in her family when she was growing up at one point. So I wouldn't say that this was a big issue for her, although there were long-term consequences. I mean, I have read, about, I don't know if this is true, a story of believing that tourists at Nara assault the deer. I have been a tourist at Nara.
Really?
And what happened to me was the deer started to push into us.
Not you,
not
kicking
me.
them.
Yes, because they wanted the food. But I didn't see any tourists assaulting the deer. I think that's extremely unlikely.
Yes. But do you think there will be good effects, like marriage inside Japanese society, especially in political system, if she became a first prime minister?
Well, of course, Thatcher.
Female prime minister.
Yes, Thatcher, is almost famous for not supporting women while she was in power. She didn't take forward a lot of policies, and she didn't help women particularly, who were other politicians. And yet, the fact that she was the first female prime minister, I think, has made a huge difference in our political system. We've since had a number of female prime ministers. I think even if you don't see her as a feminist, even if she wasn't a feminist, for young women, seeing that you can be prime minister and that you can be powerful has, it's been a role model, and it has changed people. It's changed people's perceptions of women in power.
Right. Ideally, it would be the best if she also contributes to the gender equality.
I think so. I mean, Theresa May.
Ideally,
yes.
Theresa
Theresa
May.
May, has always been very supportive of other women in power, and she's been supportive of initiatives to try and get more women into power across the political spectrum. And it's true that Margaret Thatcher did give a speech to a group whose objective was to get more women to power, and said she wanted to see more women in power. But she wasn't actively pursuing that. She had other things, of course, that she had to do politically. But yes, I think it would be good if she does become Prime Minister, if she can be supportive to other women. Because obviously in Japanese society there's still quite a long way to go.
Yes, exactly. What do you think is the most important lesson modern female leaders can learn from Margaret Thatcher?
I think be yourself and be tough, because it's going to be a rough ride. So be tough, and keep your eye on what you're trying to do, rather than the kind of insults that people are throwing at you. And work hard, because you have to work harder than men to be successful as a woman. Certainly then, and I think in Japan now.
When do you think we don't have to work harder than men? Like, when will that line be equal?
Well, I think it's changing now in the UK. I do think that. I noticed that my daughters, who are sort of 29 and 32, they work hard, but they don't seem to have the work ethic that I had.
They don't have to show that they can.
Yes.
They don't have to.
They don't have to show, and my eldest daughter is pregnant, and we have strong maternity rights now in this country. And that's improved, because sometimes what used to happen is that as soon as you had a child, you lost your career. Your career took a backward step. So things are changing, and I think though where you are in the minority, then you are very conscious that anything you do wrong will be seen as because you're a woman. You know, one of my first jobs I was working for a woman, and you know, I had a male colleague, and he said, I can't stand working for women. I worked for one woman and she was dreadful. So he took the view that if there's one bad woman to work for, then all women are bad managers. And I think that's what you feel. You feel the kind of weight, you know, for women as a whole, as well as you know, the kind of feeling that everything you're doing is being watched, and one sign of weakness and you're out.
Right. Yeah, I really get that feeling. Like when I was younger, I always thought I had to show people, like, to be admitted by the society. Like I had to show that I can do, like I can actually do what men can do. Maybe no one was forcing me, but I forced myself to show that I can do something, or prove that I can
Absolutely
do something,
do more,
to be admitted.
Yes, exactly. And you know, you see it with journalists that you know, the women journalists here, I notice, it's perhaps less so now, but they always seem to get the bad shifts, you know, the weekend shifts, the late night shifts, you know, which must be really hard to do when you have a family. But they're doing that because they have to kind of work their way up and show that they can do the toughest jobs in the most difficult circumstances. And you know, but I think hopefully that is changing.
And why did you step into this kind of society, this political society? What made you become a civil servant?
Oh well, actually in those days I joined what's called the fast stream civil service, and very few women. It was very hard to get in, and I didn't really see myself as fitting the mould. But I believed that we could make a difference as civil servants. That, you know, I saw things which weren't working around me, and I thought, well, you know, whatever the government I'm working for, you can do things well, or you can do things badly, and I want to go in and make sure that we do a good job on behalf of the electorate. Because even if I disagreed with what my ministers were wanting to do, I didn't agree with Thatcher's politics personally, I felt that it was really important that what the electorate wanted, you know, was executed well, and I believed in public service. And I think that's the same thing actually that motivates many politicians, that they believe that they, you know, they're there to make things better for their country.
And in Japan today, it's still rare for women to reach the top level of politics. And what do you think Japan can learn from Margaret Thatcher's experience and from British political culture?
Well, that it's possible, and Margaret Thatcher genuinely changed Britain. A lot of the things that she did are still in place. A lot of the way in which politicians see the world are still the same. But when she came to power, she changed, you know, she came in with a very different way of thinking about Britain and politics and the world. So, you know, she shows that it's not just possible to be a prime minister, a female prime minister, but it's also possible to make a massive difference to your country. And I think that lesson is a very important thing, you know, and it's a very important thing for every woman, whatever you think about, you know, Margaret Thatcher, indeed, what's happening in Japan.
Thank you so much.
Well, you're very welcome.
For your time.
Very enjoyable.
Very
Thank you.
valuable insights.
Yes, and good luck with your career.
Thank you.
And don't abandon the voice.
I'm sorry?
Don't abandon the voice.
Yes.
Because actually, I think this is the modern skills, aren't they? The modern skills are soft. You know, so I think there is real power in it, actually.
Thank you so much.
You're authentically feminine.